One of the great things about having good commodity prices is now you can afford to spray when you have some bugs out there, Darren.
Well, I look at it the other way, Brian. When crop prices are poor, I say, wow, you've got two things that can help make you money on the farm. That's high yield and high prices. Now, if you get both of them, that's fantastic. But if you don't have one or the other, you really have to be fussy out in your crop too, because you can't afford to lose any bushels. If they aren't worth very much, wow, you got to have every bushel you can just to break even.
Well, let's take it one step further. If you're in a dry area of the country, a lot of times we'll talk to farmers that say, oh, I don't have a lot of potential, and so I'm not too worried if I get some bugs or weeds or diseases or whatever. But what our dad always told us growing up is he said, rain corrects your mistakes. In other words, you've got to be a lot better farmer in a dry year than you do in a wet year, because in a dry year, anything you do on the farm, any mistake you make is magnified because you don't have rain to come along and help give your plant an extra boost.
Well, Brian, sometimes we get criticized because they say, well, you're corn farmers and 200 bushel corn times $5 a bushel, that's $1,000 an acre. Well, I can see why you have to spray bugs there, but what about my alfalfa or my sunflowers or my wheat?
Well, how about my wheat? I mean, you're looking at our wheat right behind us, and we sprayed that for bugs, and I'll tell you the reason why. Because when we walk out into the wheat and we sweep through, taking our sweep net, or I'll take Darren's baseball cap and sweep through and find some bugs. You know, when I see a bunch of bugs and I realize, oh, I can spray the full rate of a pyrethroid, something like Silencer or Declare, for $2 an acre, $2 an acre. Why would I not spray if I've got harmful insects that are hurting that crop? And the problem with insects is not just the leaf feeding, the leaf tissue that they destroy. It's also the fact that diseases can enter in. Diseases are much more likely to get into that plant once it's open. I mean, it's just like you and me. If we had an open wound, you're much more likely to get infection, right? The other thing is we'll have certain bugs will carry diseases and actually inject them into the plant.
Well, a good example is potato leafhoppers that happen right in alfalfa.
Yep.
You see those leafhoppers come out and all of a sudden you've got that hopper burn look across your field and it's injecting a toxin right into those plants. And alfalfa brings up another good point. We're looking at a perennial crop here that we're going to take multiple cuttings throughout the season. And guys say, well, you know, I got some bugs there, but I'm just going to cut it here in a week and, you know, maybe we'll take a lot of those right out of the field. No way! That's not how I look at it. The way I look at it is, wow, I damaged my plant. I'm going to have poor regrowth coming out, and there are going to be some bugs already out there that may stop my regrowth completely. I need to spray insecticide almost every cutting in our part of the world because we've got harmful bugs that are out there all the time, all the way through the season.
So the main reason why we're talking about insects today is in any crop you're in, we want you to scout. And we're not saying go spray if you have basically no bugs or almost no bugs. You've got to look at what's called the economic threshold. And the economic threshold has changed dramatically in the last 5 or 6 years because crop prices have gone up, yield potential has gone up, and at the same time, insecticide prices have come way down. So like we were talking about a minute ago, where the full rate of a pyrethroid insecticide, Silencer, Declare, is $2 an acre. I mean, that used to be $6 to $10 an acre. So the treatment costs are whole different and the value of the crop is whole different. See, the economic threshold has dramatically flipped. So in some crops, like soybeans, for example, where you might have said, oh, I can get by with 100 aphids per plant or 150 aphids per plant. Now the threshold might be 10 or 20 if you take the same threshold and you take the new math to that and see where it comes out.
Well, when you look at insecticide costing $2, that's a $2 investment you're making in your crop. And you think about soybeans, you know, well over $12 a bushel. Well, it takes 1/6 of a bushel to justify the treatment. You know, it doesn't take many bugs to hurt your yield by 1/6 of a bushel. It's the same thing in corn. When you've got $5 corn, wow, you know, you can spray for $2. It takes less than half a bushel to justify the treatment.
So the main thing today is just understand every crop is a little different, every bug is a little different. We want you to study up on economic thresholds and also understand if, let's say, you have 3 bugs out there, the threshold might not be reached with any of those 3 bugs, but if you add the 3 together, now you might be at a threshold level.
You're talking about 3 different species. So let's just say in soybeans, for example, you had some bean leaf beetles, some grasshoppers, and some soybean aphids, and you say, well, I haven't met threshold for any one species. Well, when you look at, hey, I've got some of these, I'm 90% of the way to the threshold here and 80% of the way here and 70% here. Wow, I'm way over a threshold in total for my whole field. The other thing that we see guys have a lot of trouble with is you may have to make multiple applications in a crop. Like sunflowers, for example. There are some stages with sunflowers where you're very susceptible to getting different insects in your crop. But once that head turns over, it's really tough to get a spray to go up underneath the head. So you have to spray at the optimum timings. So every time you're going out in your field, whether you're spraying a herbicide or a fungicide, or maybe putting some foliar fertilizer on, you have to scout ahead of time and look for different problems in your field like bugs that you may be able to throw an insecticide in the mix.
When we talk about these different insecticides, they are compatible with most herbicides and most fungicides. I mean, in some cases you might need to do a jar test or just talk to your agronomist, but what we find is a lot of times when we're putting in herbicide or fungicide, spraying that out on the crop, we can throw an insecticide in no problem, especially when it's the pyrethroids. Now, you can use pyrethroids for most bugs, but it is a good idea to rotate different insecticides, and in some cases you're not going to be able to get away with a pyrethroid. So for example, Silencer and Declare are not going to kill mites. That's where you might have to go to something like Lorsban. So I think about mites in several different crops, in corn, in soybeans, in wheat. We may have mites in any of those crops. If you have mites, switch over to Lorsban. Just be a little bit careful because Lorsban will make your mix just a little bit hotter. So you don't want to put Lorsban together with foliar fertilizer, for example. That could actually burn the leaf tissue on your crop.
Well, we often talk about $100 an hour jobs on our show, about things that you just have to do yourself on the farm. One of those things is before you make any application out in your field, you need to do a little bit of scouting and pay attention for insects, because the return on investment, whether you're in corn, soybeans, alfalfa, wheat, or any number of crops, is very good when you can spray for most bugs for $2 an acre in many cases. It doesn't take a whole lot of crop gain or crop yield gain to justify that treatment.
Well, it doesn't take much yield gain to justify treating our Weed of the Week either. We'll tell you what will stop it on your farm coming up later in the show.